Hello everyone, Anita here and welcome to the first video of 2018, which coincidentally is a digital video, which is not that often seen on my channel, so enjoy it while it lasts. Although I have to say that because of this artwork, this piece, I'm actually really excited about doing more digital pieces like outside of work. So yeah, I am hoping that we will see some more of that kind of thing. But yeah, so in this piece, I am working for a competition entry for the Huion brand. They had a winter impressions theme for this contest. So that's the background story. They were giving away to the winner, and they were giving away a graphic tablet, like a drawing monitor. If you're following me on Facebook, you will know that I've been recently considering finally upgrading my tablet. I'm drawing currently on an A6, very, very old Bamboo Fun tablet. They don't even make this model anymore. That's how old it is. And so it's really like ruining my wrist. It really hurts. So I've decided to upgrade, but while we were discussing my options and stuff, one person posted that Huion was holding a contest, so I thought, you know what, I'm gonna try. Who knows, perhaps I'm gonna win this, because drawing monitors are really expensive, and I don't think I will be able to afford it if I don't actually win it. So spoiler alert, I did not win. So another amazing artwork actually won, so I'm not bitter about it. And I've actually learned a lot on this piece, so yeah. So what the premise, the idea behind this piece is something that I've had in my head for a while. It's this land built on tops of sleeping Yeti. So you have a bunch of really just this, Yetis taking a nap, and they're huddled together. Which creates those dome shapes that eventually they somehow got covered by, snow and frost and ice and all those things, crystals. And, and for some reason, people decided, or some kind of creatures decided that, this is the perfect spot to establish a community, make a settlement. Don't ask about the details, okay? There are people who are making their villages next to volcanoes because the ground is good. Okay, so let's not get too much into the detail. But I really like this concept, but I thought pretty much this whole the creative process of this piece was me just going back and forth. Is this enough? Is this enough to actually have a chance at the competition? Because when I'm creating stuff for myself, it's just for myself or for you guys. In this case, it's for other people as well, who are potentially saving me a lot of money that I don't have. So yeah, I was just overthinking it constantly. One of my biggest issues with this piece is that I actually feel like it's overdone. It's not something that I feel it's bad. I just feel like I spent way too much time thinking about this piece. And so the original idea was to have the Yeti, the world, the Yeti huddled, everything. But I thought this was just not enough to be interesting. So I wanted to add this first a foreground layer, another layer to this painting. So I would push the Yetis back, and then I wanted to add a foreground layer with a ship. What did I just say? A sheep. A ship that just a merchant ship, or just some kind of vehicle. You know what I mean? Just some kind of thing that's flying in the air, with some people in it, and it would be very, very colorful. I knew I wanted it to be super colorful. One of the rules of the competition was to put a logo, the Huion logo somewhere. So I thought actually putting in one of the banners, I wanted to have a merchant boat with a lot of banners. And so I thought it would be a very good idea to have the logo there. It would be in the first, view of a person. You can see me actually working on it there. I wasn't exactly sure about its shape. So it's actually, in this piece, the background was sketched traditionally, and then I came in and added another sketch on top of that digitally, and that was the ship. But another thing I had a really big problem is, and that's kind of, I still am learning digital art, not really, learning. I suppose that's a good, I want to make it mine. So I'm not following any tutorials. I'm just trying to figure out ways to create a bit more of my style, a bit more watercolor texture in digital form. Of course, it's never going to be exactly like that, although if you are following another YouTuber here, Green Maggot, I'm going to link her channel below. She is my guru when it comes to digital art. I love the way she adds texture. And I actually have to say that I went to her channel just to look for tips at some point. I was so completely lost. I didn't like anything I was doing. So I really needed help. And she was using different brushes. I use Kyle's watercolor brushes. She uses Kyle's, I think, dry media brushes, something. Well, I had a set of those, and I was looking for, I actually could use a soft pastel, I think was it, and I actually found a texture that was just really nice to add on top of my watercolor layers that mimicked that extra layer of colored pencils that I'm using most of the time, or the soft pastel that I'm using sometimes, and it's just, I'm so thankful to her for teaching me. So go visit her, check her videos. She's doing a lot of really beautiful digital art with that really textury feel. I love her art, so yeah. So here I'm just I'm still working on the outlines because, like I've said, this is a very long video, and I was struggling the whole time trying to figure out where I wanted to go with this picture. Because the original sketch, the original color scheme I had in mind was basically like a standalone thing. So I had brown bears, red blankets, and then white on top with a bit misty, maybe spatters, stuff like that. I might still do actually a watercolor version of that piece because I'm curious how it would look like. So I don't know, we'll see. But actually, I need a sippy. Do I even have a sippy? I don't have a sippy. How is that even possible? Okay. But in this case, since I brought in a foreground layer, I needed to figure out how to make them each be visible, because I still wanted the background layer to be visible, but still look like there is a spacing between them, things like that. So I had tried, at least for the first time, to get a few layers of a few color schemes. I normally don't do that for my paintings, but here I just because I'm usually set on one idea. Like in the case of just the background, just the bears, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with just the bears, but that didn't work anymore when I've added the foreground, the boat. And so I started playing a little bit around with with different color schemes. I came up with one I thought I liked, and but I still wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do with the background, and it seemed very daunting to me. So and because I was really pressed on time by that moment, because the whole process, I think, with figuring out what I wanted to draw took me about 2 weeks, just because Christmas time is really busy. But then the painting process, I had time only during the last few days of December, and the deadline was 31st of December. So I was really pressed there, especially for a person who wasn't exactly sure what she was doing. So you see me struggling a lot because I'm still figuring out what I want to do, how to do things, how to get the effect I want, how to get to the destination that I have in mind. So that's the typical problem when you have, when your skill does not match your imagination. That's why I feel like I need more practice. Also, I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm working on a sepia-toned line art. That's something that I really want to do lately in watercolor, but I don't have anything to use as a sepia tone for my lines. So I'm living the dream in digital art. So here I'm basically filling in the areas, keeping everything very, very saturated, very warm. All the colors are, they're just basically in your eyes. They're supposed to be flashing in your eyes. I wanted them to be super colorful. And I really liked the way it turned out, so I'm not complaining about it. It took me a while to get to that point, but I'm actually really happy with where I've arrived. So I'm just adding shading, figuring out, where the shading goes, what the shape actually is, because that's something also that I wasn't sure of, where the light source is, because I don't have a light source here. So I couldn't figure out where the light source would be. So that was a little bit tricky. But I've learned a lot. Really, really a lot. So at this point, my mind is completely on the foreground. And as you know, I'm not exactly, especially when tiny details like this, like these characters, I don't particularly care about, if they are anatomically correct or not. So I was working off of stick figures. I love that. They always have so much energy for me, and they don't take away from the background and the surrounding, which was the most important thing for me. And I'm also, one thing I can tell you is that it was so hard not to go in too close. That's something that I keep having trouble with. I keep coming too close to the painting. That's also, I think, a digital problem. Although it depends on what your style is, I guess. But when it comes to my style of painting, since I come from a traditional art, always, when I scan my artwork, and then I zoom in, it's just a mess. Okay, when I just started coming back into illustrating a few years back, it was just unacceptable for me. So for example, I wouldn't scan my art. I would take pictures because I couldn't handle how messy it looked, how the lines were not perfect when you looked really close. But when you looked from further away, like you would normally look at the artwork, it was perfectly fine. It was just, when you zoom in really close, you can see all the little, imperfections, and so don't zoom in too much. And so with digital art, you can zoom in. You can zoom really, really close if you want to. And you can work and do little tiny details, and you can make it as perfect as you want. But honestly, if you zoom out, as with traditional art, you will not see it. And actually having that little bit of imperfection, for me, it helps to achieve a little bit more genuine traditional look. Actually, all of my favorite artworks, and also the one that actually won this competition, they have a lot of textured imperfections that are on purpose, I hope. But they're just absolutely, there's so many things to look at, and they look so rough, just because, it's just about feeling, about color, about lighting. And so I actually try on purpose to work a little bit further away from the canvas, and I'm not trying to zoom in too much. Sometimes it's hard, especially when I'm doing lines. This is a very good example of that, because I try to add those lines of as far away as I could, just because it was easier to get a nice movement of the wrist. Like I mentioned, my drawing tablet is really small. It's hard to get a good, nice motioned line like that on a bigger in a big painting like that. So I had to zoom in really, really out to get a nice movement. And and so I'm done here with I probably should mention, and I did that just because I wanted to have a rough texture to those lines so that they look hand-drawn instead of digitally drawn. Yeah. So here I'm done pretty much with the boat, and I'm thinking, in my head, I wanted it to float, and I wanted the bottom of the painting, the bears themselves, to be slightly covered by a mist, just because I felt it was too sharp. They had to be, of course, further away, so they would be covered with the mist. How do you call it? The distance? You know what I mean. The thing that happens in perspective when you look further away. I never remember how it's called. So, so here I've decided, okay, I'm going to hide the layer completely, because at this point I already kind of settled to use a very monochromatic color scheme. That's what I'm talking about with the distance fog. I think that's how it's called. Everything seems more blue, right? So I knew that I wanted to have the snow white, and here I'm actually drawing with a soft pastel brush that adds that little bit of texture, and that was like a godsend for me. I was so happy that I found it. It's perfect. It makes the exact same effect as if I would use just a little bit of soft pastel or colored pencil and just layered that together, exactly the same. So I was really, really happy. And so when I was putting this in, I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to go monochromatic. I'm just going to make it very light at the top and then darker towards the bottom. That will also make any white details that I would like to add, the snow, the sparklies that I was adding under the boat to make it seem like it's magical and it's flying. That would make it stand out more on a darker background, of course. Which didn't happen before. As you could see this, me doing it before. I've added some white clouds and then I tried adding those lines on top of them, but it just didn't work out. It's something that would work probably in watercolor, just because, it's very hard to work with white uncolored. So here it took me quite a lot of time to do the snow, but it was so therapeutic. You have no idea. It was so nice because the effect was so good, and I was so satisfied that for the first time ever I'm finally getting the effect that I want. So satisfying. So I was really, really happy, and I just kind of let myself go. I think I was drawing this a day, I think on the 29th, if I'm correct, and that was really late at night. That was the time I could work, so it was really late at night. And at this point I was just like almost zombie-like, just painting it in, and it was so satisfying. So here I'm doing the exact thing I was talking about. I'm changing the colors to be a bit like a gradation from the lightest snow, a bit darker blankets, and then even darker bears, and even darker, the bottom. And when I filled this in, I was like, yes, okay, this is it. I love it. Let's go with this. So I'm adding a little bit of this cloudy thing, foggy effect at the bottom to, like I've said, to kind of blend in the bears with the bottom, with what they're laying at. Because, they have to kind of disappear. They can't be too sharp. That was like one of also my big issues with this painting. The fact that I really wanted to show what was on the bears, but having the foreground now very sharp, I was afraid that if I added too much detail to the cities and to the bridges, that would actually defeat the whole purpose of distance. That was also why I've decided on a very, very cool color scheme in the background, as opposed to the very, very warm foreground, just in hopes that they would be very, very separate. I was really worried about that, especially here when I was adding the fur, and I was thinking, why are you adding the fur? You can't really see it that well, but it does add a little bit of texture, which I really liked. So even though, it's always a battle, which details to add and which to leave out. I wanted to have a bit of a textured fur feeling. Lately, I'm really enjoying drawing fur. You could see in my last Yeti painting when I just spent a ridiculous amount of time adding fur. And in the end, that's just what made it for me. I loved it. So this is just me adding lots and lots of fur. And I'm trying to also have a bit of a gradation. So one of the things that I've stayed away for a while now, I used to add very sharp lines wherever the fur was, and they were very graphic. And that's something that I really felt it didn't fit my style, and I didn't love it at all. So nowadays I'm adding a very soft, kind of layered fur lines. I don't know, is this even interesting to you guys? Because whenever I make those videos, I'm just watching the time lapse and I'm just chattering about whatever comes to my mind while I'm doing these things. You know, real time. So here I'm adding the crystals, and they started as just regular crystals. You know, you guys know how I love my crystals. But then I've kind of, when you think about the lore of the painting, the story is that, you know, this is a snowy country. So that's when I started changing the color to a bit cooler tone, rather than that teal. Because I was thinking more towards like a glassy, icy crystals. And that's when I also decided to have the bridge formations to be glass, or rather ice, kind of very transparent. Something that I didn't actually plan from the beginning. But I also felt, that's another point, I felt that if I made them solid or opaque or stone, is something that I planned in the beginning. I felt that they would be too sharp. They would stand out too much and kind of be too sharp for the background. I needed to make it softer. That's another thing. I also didn't want to add too much detail the further I went. So you can see me actually just scribbling around as I spend a long time painting in the foreground, but then towards the back is just a few scribbles. And I have to say, I'm really, really happy with how it turned out. It's nothing really, really, you know, excessive, which is what I wanted, but it adds that little bit of magic. I mean, hey, crystal/ice bridges. Hello, that's like amazing. At least in my head, it's like, poof, magic immediately. So, oh no. And I'm getting a message. So this is just, these are the last steps. At this point, I was already seeing the end of the painting. Somewhere along, when I was still painting the foreground, the boat, I really couldn't see where this would end. And it was very stressful, especially when you have a timed piece like that, when you really have to hit the deadline, because, you know, otherwise you're done for. You just really don't have a piece. And so it was really stressful for me. But once I actually hit that point where I've decided, okay, we're doing a monochromatic, very blue, cool background, that's when I just started basically filling in areas to fit together. And that's when everything started, okay, we're having this, we're good. It's just a matter of pushing through and finishing it on time. And I was actually done with one day to spare. I was done on the 30th. So I could enjoy my New Year's Eve. And yeah, so I'm really, 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 really happy with this one. It was such a journey for me because this painting really took a lot more thinking and planning than any other one. And mostly because I was very stubborn and I've decided that I wanted to do the Yetis. And since I only had the background planned initially, the foreground, you know, and then fitting it together, that took the longest, I think. Because as you can see, it's not actually that much to paint on top. It's just a few houses. They don't even have that much shading. It's just a lot of lines, just because they are further away, so they don't need that much shading. And then I was playing a little bit with the shading of the crystals once again, leaving it very, very simple. You know how hard it was for me? Here, as you can see, I was trying to add some extra, and then I just like, no, Anita, you can't add white lines to it, okay? It's gonna look bad. And then as a last touch, I wanted to have, I wanted it to seem like it was constantly snowing, and I wanted the bags to be very fluffy. So I'm adding a little spatter on top of that's what I was talking about at the beginning, that I wanted to have a little spatter in watercolor. Whenever I do a digital piece like that, even though, you probably shouldn't do this, but I do it by first planning it out in watercolor. Because I do not want to be, I don't want to do the digital way, I want to do digital the traditional way. So it's just basically for me an easier way to work on pieces that need to go somewhere, far away. So here I'm adding a bit of a texture, also trying to keep it quite simple. As you can see, I wanted to go further with it, but I've deleted it because it was just too much. Also trying to keep it very, very subtle. So I'm lowering the opacity. And I am in love with this painting. Here I was trying to add a little bit of a mist in between the mounds, the bears, the yetis. That was my initial idea as well, to have a bit of a mist coming between them because, it will gather there, I suppose. But it just didn't feel good. Once again, it was too much detail. So here I'm coming in with just lines to create a bit of a more foggy, misty effect. And what I'm doing then is I've decided to have those lines to kind of curve and go under the boat. So it seems like they are floating into those lines. Like it's a current, some kind of, I don't know, magical current, even air, mist, whatever. So you can see me here deleting part of it and then just coming back in and trying to curve them. And as you can see, I'm sorry for that, but I'm really turning my canvas around. It makes it simpler, easier for my wrist like that if I can just turn it around. So here I'm trying to add different weights of lines to make it seem like these are a bit, the closer they are to the ship, they're a bit, thicker. And then they of course get thinner as they go towards the bears. And then pretty much it's just a way, it's just, these are the last minutes of me working with it, and I'm trying to figure out just what the best thing was. So I'm adding a little bit, I wanted to add a bit of a snowstorm on the top, and I've decided not to. I wanted to add a little bit of clouds under the ship, I've decided not to. In the end, I've decided to add a little bit just those teal bluey, the same shade as the crystals, just a little bit of a sparkle just to make it seem more magical. And that was pretty much it for me, just adding a bit more contrast under the ship. The last parts are really the most fun for me because it's just fiddling with it, it's fiddling, it's done, I can just, it's more relaxing. I always like that part the most because you can already see the outcome of it all. And I'm not gonna be, I'm really proud of this piece. I feel like my skill definitely improved. It was painful, but my skill definitely improved, which is the most important thing. So here is a bit of a close-up for the finished product. I hope you've enjoyed this process. It's a very long video, but it was a very, very long painting process. And of course, if you would like to see the full picture, you can see it on Facebook and on Instagram and on Twitter. And if you would like to get any, merchandise, it's on my Redbubble store. So yeah, thank you so very much for watching, and let's, Happy New Year's, guys! Happy 2018! I'll see you in the next video. Bye!